I'd love to answer as many questions as I can today. I'm so honored that you guys read the book. So however you want to do it, Julie, is 100% cool with me.
Well, let me tell you, I think this might be your best one yet.
Oh, thanks. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, I think it's so universal. And I know you've got examples with men in here, but I think for women in particular, this overthinking situation is something that I have found in working with women is really specific to women too. So I would love to know in your data that you did to prepare for this book, if you found any of that.
Yeah, it was interesting. I mean, I think people ask me, what were the surprises of the book? So like for me, one was how many people were into overthinking, like, and how many people, like, here's a really easy example that I stumbled on the other day. Like, you're an overthinker if you've ever gone back and read a sent message or a sent email, like an email you already sent, like it's gone, like you can't do it. It's out there. And you go like, and I caught myself doing that where I was like, I sent this 4 days ago. Why am I in my sent box? And so I think that was the first surprise was, wow, everybody does it. And then like everybody does it, especially now because last year was so challenging. They're like, I've been saying 2020 was catnip for overthinking. Like if you weren't overthinking before 2020, I've talked to so many, example I give is like stay-at-home moms or working moms. They're like, I'm terrible at virtual school. I'm terrible at it. I go, you should be. You've never done it. The worst time to have to learn something new is in the middle of a global pandemic. Like it's the hard, like, and so like a soundtrack that I've been encouraging people to use is, this is my first global pandemic. Like you should write that down on a note, put it by your computer, put it on the fridge and go, oh, I'm sorry, I messed that up. This is my first global pandemic. It's not my 10th. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. And then, and then the third surprise for me was how many of my own sentences, my soundtracks ended with "you idiot." Like I think there's a real power to listen for your punctuation. How are you punctuating the thoughts that are in your head? And this book taught me to start paying attention to my thoughts. And that's nice language. Usually when I'm really like, it's a broken soundtrack, like it's not idiot. I'm keeping this like TBS edited for TV, not Cinemax. And so for me, that was the surprise. But I think too, men might have a harder time admitting they do it, but I think a lot of men do it too. And I wanted to write a book that a wife could hand to a husband that the husband would actually read. Like that's like, there's a woman named Sharon. I posted her on my Instagram story. Like that's, I'm so honored that you think this is my best book. I think it's the one that feels the stickiest, where like, there's so many different ways to apply it. And the information is so simple, but it's like, I call this like a Trojan horse book where you go, the 3 questions. Is it true? Is it helpful? Is it kind? Those aren't complicated words, but when you actually ask them and sit with them, there's stuff hidden inside them. So I wanted to write a book that a wife could give a husband that they'd actually read. And this woman, Sharon, that I put on my story on my Instagram the other day, she has really thinning hair. Like she has really thinning hair. She's out of shape. And she was like, no one wants to see me. That was her broken soundtrack. And she changed it to her new soundtrack is people don't want to see you. They want to be known by you and they want to be known. And she posted a video in this private Facebook group the next day because she let me share her story and all these people are so kind to her. And she said, my husband never reads books. He never does podcasts. He never does anything like that. And he's at our daughter's dance rehearsal and he has to sit in the car for 2 hours and usually plays 2 hours of Candy Crush. And tonight he called me and said, I'm on page 65. And like, she was crying. And so every wife has had that moment where they've bumped into a book that they know would be amazing for their husband, but they won't read it. And sometimes it's in how it's positioned. Like no husband, like if you give a husband a book that's like, I heard a great book about rage. I thought you might like to read this book all about like blind rage. You're going to put it on your nightstand. Like they're not going to read it. So I wanted to write a book that every woman could be helped by, but also could go, yeah, I think you would like this. Like, and I think it's written in a way that you'd identify with and go with. And so that's where I feel like, not to over spiritualize things, but this book feels like I received it versus I forced it. Like I didn't feel like I white knuckled this book. Like I got to be part of the creation of it. I'm like, oh, that was fun. Like, awesome. Like, and I wrote the book. One of my soundtracks was to be light and easy. So like 4 years ago, my wife was like, you're a jerk for 2 years when you write a book and you're a jerk for 2 years when you sell it. And that doesn't work. Like I'd rather you be a plumber and happy than be an author and be this way. So we need so I really had to go, okay, I'm going to be light and easy. Like, how do I do that? I was really specific about that. And so like, just to be honest with you. So like this morning I found out that the book didn't hit the New York Times bestsellers list, which is super disappointing, definitely. But I'm also like, I think it's just getting started. Like, I think it's going to be a message that sticks. Like, I think, so I don't, even though it'd be a lie to go, I'm not disappointed. I am disappointed, but I'm also like really hopeful and really light and easy about like, I think it's going to continue to grow and continue to help people. And that's not the stamp I did it for. Like, I did it for life change. And I think I'm going to like, so like, and I promise I'll let you ask a question. I just love this topic. I saw a dad post, his old soundtrack was, I can't be a good dad because I didn't have a good dad. And his new soundtrack was that he could be a good dad. And like, those kids' lives will be different because their dad is now understanding he can be a good dad, even though his dad sucked. And so like, my buddies are like, what's the price of that? Is that worth $100 to you, John? Is that worth $1,000? So like, the dividends and the chance for me to get a front row seat to the life change, like, is amazing. And I can already like, again, like the publisher sent me this long email that was like, hey, we're so sorry to hit the New York Times list. And it was so kind for them to say that. But I was kind of like, oh, we're just getting started. Like and my agent called me. He's like, hey, I want to talk. Like, all these people called to kind of talk me off the ledge. And I was like, we're good. We're good. We're gonna like, it's just getting started. Like, no, like, as people share it, I think it's just going to help more people.
And I would wonder if some of that ease comes from the fact of what you just said before, like you kind of received it and you were a co-collaborator in it rather than trying to force it. It was almost like you're just kind of a vessel for the message that was coming through that we all needed to hear and need to hear on the regular.
Well, and it keeps going. Like, it keeps going. Where like, I had a woman say, because I did this thing called the Overthinking Challenge, which was so much fun. We had like nearly 10,000 people do it. It was a 5-day free challenge. We're doing another one in June about perfectionism, which I think is going to be just amazing.
Oh, you're going to need to send us the information for that.
Yeah, it's 100% free. And like, I love it because it's like, I really work hard on the content. It's not like it's free and you get like 4 seconds of ideas. Like, it's a fire hose. But we had this woman say, hey, how do I get over imposter syndrome? And I was like, well, I think the problem is the word over. Like, that's the broken soundtrack, because over is a word of perfectionism, as if you climbed over a wall and now you're done with it. I think you change the word to through. How do I go through imposter syndrome? Because I've written 7 books, some of it the New York Times bestsellers list. I still feel imposter syndrome some days. Like, I'm not a real writer. I go through it. So I'd much rather you go, okay, how do I go through this situation versus I'm going to go over and it'll be finished. So I feel like I keep getting these moments where I get to share new ideas as we talk about the content, and people go, oh, I'm just going to trade out the word over for through. That's such a better word, because then I don't feel like a failure when I feel afraid again. Like, I told myself, like, everybody on a health challenge, everybody's had a health situation. They're like, once I do this one thing, I'll never struggle with my health again. No, you're going to go through health challenges. It's much better to go, I'm going through it, not, oh, I didn't get over it. I failed it. I must be a failure. This one didn't work. I'll try the next one, the next one, the next one.
And Shaun T talks about that a lot. He talks about not the after picture, the after. There's no real after picture. It's the after.
Yeah.
It's the continuation of, not just, oh, let me do this 21-day program and then I'm set for life. We're all out of business if that's the case.
Yeah.
So.
Well, it's more about a lifestyle change. Like learning soundtracks is a practice. It's not an event. So it's a practice. Being healthy is a practice. Being in shape is a practice. Making different food decisions is a practice. And I think once you do that, it gives you a lot more freedom to go. It's not a pass fail. It's a practice.
So anyone have questions? Anyone want to be not scared and want to be brave?
Yeah, this is it. I'll tell you, I did one of these before, where I got to be in a room with, it was Seth Godin was who I love, this great author, and nobody would ask questions except me and this other dude. And we dominated, because we both looked at each other like who cares? I think never try to look cool and miss an opportunity, or never, you can look cool later. So he and I were both like we asked, and people kept looking at us like, you maniacs. And I was like, I got Seth go, I'm going to ask these questions. So yeah, let's talk. Definitely.
Yeah. So who's got questions and wants to unmute and ask? Don't be silly. All
right, Nancy, let's do it.
Okay, unmute, Nancy.
There we go. Hi, everybody. How are you doing? My question is, until very recently, and of course, with delving into your book, I thought overthinking was a good thing. Like, I'm going to really give it time and really think about X, Y, and Z before I do something. And now I'm like, okay, I think I'm like I gotta get through this. How about that?
Sure.
So I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on somebody like me who thinks, oh, let's overthink the situation until you're paralyzed and do nothing about it.
Yeah, so that's a really common question. That's a great like point of feedback, and it's one that I've talked to a lot of people about. And so, fortunately, it's one I can help you solve immediately. Oh, here's the difference between being prepared, being detailed, analytical, like having all the information, whatever. I'll give you 2 points. One, the difference between being prepared and overthinking is being prepared always leads to an action. It always leads to a decision. Overthinking always leads to more overthinking. So if you said to me, I can't tell which one I'm doing, I'd say, well, show me what it turned into. Did it turn into a workout? Did it turn into an action? Did it turn into a decision? And if it didn't, you're overthinking. So that's how you know. Be prepared. Get the information. That's the first thing. The second thing is the key is to change a simple word change, a soundtrack change. There's people that will say, I can't do something. I can't make a decision until I have all the information. And we haven't lived in an all word for 100 years. You will never have all the information. So what you have to do is say, instead of saying all, I say enough. I have enough information to make this decision. You could right now go, until I know all about nutrients, until I know all about exercise, until I know all about the physiology of the body or my knees or the weather or whatever, I can't decide something, but you will never have all. You have to define, okay, this is enough. I have enough to do this thing today. I have enough to make this decision this week. And so that's what I'd say there. But yeah, the big thing is being prepared leads to decision and action. You launch the thing, you do the thing. Overthinking always just leads to more overthinking. It's kind of a snake that eats its own tail. And the one that always makes me think of is loneliness and isolation work the same way. Like when you're lonely, the broken soundtrack you hear is, I should spend more time alone figuring out why I feel lonely. When the answer is to go get into community. And so loneliness and isolation, that broken soundtrack kind of lies to you to go, you feel lonely and you're the only one who feels lonely. You should spend some time alone figuring out why you feel alone. And then you just keep feeling lonely versus going, when I feel alone, I need to go be with people. I need to tell somebody I feel alone. I need to change that soundtrack. So that's a great question, Nancy. It's definitely one that a bunch of people have asked me.
That's a great question, especially for the coaching community, because what happens is let's overthink how we're going to invite people to join us. And let's just overthink it. And then let's never invite anyone to join us. And that's what happens. So what a beautiful soundtrack to replace that other one with, so that now you know if you're actually doing preparation or if you're actually just overthinking. So that's
amazing. Did it turn into something? Can I show, there's always evidence. You'll always be able to go, okay, well, here's the thing. I sent the 4 emails. I asked the 3 friends. I did these actions. That's always when okay, it actually turned into something good.
Okay, who else? I have to mute because my dogs are barking. So, okay, Kim, unmute, go.
So I just listened to your, finished the audio this morning. And so I was listening to the bonus. I'm sorry, they're doing work outside. I hope it's not too loud.
Oh, you're fine.
So, in the bonus chapter, you talked about shark music, and I am trained in, it's called the Circle of Security, which trains families on how to work with their kids. And we talk about the concept of shark music, and they use the Jaws soundtrack, where if you're walking through a forest and you hear the Jaws soundtrack, you have one idea of what this movie is going to be. But if you hear beautiful spa music as they're walking through, then you're hearing something different and you're ready and you're primed and you're not lifting your feet off the floor because you're worried about the sharks that are in the movie theater. And so my question is, the book just spoke to me in this concept of soundtracks and what we're saying in our heads all the time. And I want to teach this to my kids and help them to kind of stop the soundtrack before it starts, or have a better soundtrack before they get stuck. And do you have any, I know you have kids yourself, so do you have any suggestions on how to start kind of trickling this down to the younger generations to kind of break those negative soundtracks before they start?
Yeah, it's a great question. So one of the things we're doing is the book's only been out a week, so it's funny to already think about this. We're probably going to do a series of books where it's like 90 days of parenting soundtracks, 90 days of fitness soundtracks, because we've seen all these applications. So I think we'll continue to do that because a lot of parents have said, hey, what do I do with this? So the first thing I would say, because let's not wait for the book. The first thing I would say is add the word to the conversation. So when they say, I'm never going to make the team, say, I think that could be a broken soundtrack. And we know that broken soundtracks always travel in absolutes. Never, forever, everyone. Everyone else is more popular than me. I think that might be a broken soundtrack. So even just giving them that word, like, oh, that's a soundtrack. You'll be amazed how easy it is for a kid to spot a soundtrack. It's kind of like this. Like when I work with a 23-year-old, I've got, a 23-year-old who helps me with some social media stuff. For me to do the new way, I have to first unlearn the old way because I grew up in the old way. For a 23-year-old to do the new way, they grew up in the new way. So they go, no, we can do this TikTok thing. And I go, here's a complicated way we can do it. And they go, no, there's an app. It does it in like 4 seconds. So the beauty of a kid, a 9-year-old, a 10-year-old, 11-year-old, they don't have to unlearn 15 years of broken soundtracks. So you'll actually be surprised how fast they can go, oh, I get that concept. Here's a good soundtrack. This is a soundtrack I'm going to listen to. That to me is part of what's really fun. So you introduce it, you let them be surprised. And then the second thing is you let them be a kid. There's a real temptation as a parent when you've experienced something good. You've read a goal setting book. Like I get this question all the time. Dads especially will go, hey, read this book about goal setting. I'd love my kid to read it. I want my 15-year-old to read it. And the dad's 45. And I always say, and he's like, I'm having a hard time with him reading it. I always go, you gave yourself 30 extra years to understand why this book was good. You're expecting a 15-year-old to skip those 3 decades of life experience and just get it. So part of your challenge as a parent is to take this good thing, to take soundtracks and go, okay, I think there's 3 or 4 things that if I talk to my kid about, they'll get. And I'm going to put it in their language and I'm going to help them listen to the things they're saying. And I'm going to teach them how to do that. But I'm not going to go, I want you to have the exact same experience I did with this thing, because they're kids and they're gonna see it differently. But yeah, that for me, that's how I'd approach it. And which is again why I think there's so much runway to say, okay, hey, here's something I heard my kids say this, and here's, like we had one of the women in the study said her son got a new soundtrack because he had been told he was overweight by a gym teacher in like the 6th grade, and they kind of taken that on as a broken soundtrack. And so then the kid got to a place where he's like, that gym teacher doesn't get to define me. Like he doesn't get to define me. And he wrote a new soundtrack and is leaning into that new soundtrack. And that's what's interesting. This is a time of life where kids are picking up broken soundtracks. Like there's an 82-year-old volunteer at the YMCA in Brentwood down the street from me. I spoke to their team, and his name is Judd, and he volunteers in the skate park, which is hilarious to me because he's 82. Like he's not on a half pipe. He's not going to ollie. And Judd, one morning, this 13-year-old said, hey, I just found out my parents are getting divorced and it's my fault. And Judd was there to say, it's not your fault. That's not true. As a broken soundtrack tried to take root. And so there's a real power in having these conversations now before they take root, and you have to try to undo them when you're in your 30s, your 40s, your 50s.
Why is it that we have such a predilection towards those negative soundtracks instead of something positive? Why?
Well, I mean, that's like that. That was one of the surprising things to me in the research was the study that Roy Baumeister did, that we don't even have an opposite word for trauma. Like there's not an opposite word in the English language that means overwhelming joy, where like something, like I told a story last night. This is so ridiculous. Like 18 years ago, somebody at work sent me, her name was Tara, sent me an email about a surprise party. And I didn't read the whole email. I didn't know it was a surprise party. And I accidentally told her husband. And when we went to the party that night, I walked in and she said, oh, this is John. He's the guy who ruined the surprise party. And I was like, hey, everybody. Like it was super awkward. I can tell that story. Like, why does my brain need to be like, hey, I see you're shopping for bread. You want to remember that time you ruined that birthday party? I'm like, what? No, I don't. I would really, yeah. So I think that's, a bunch of people said they laughed when they read that section about your brain is kind of a jerk. Like you're kind of being a jerk right now. And I'm going to give you some better tools to be nicer, because you have a tendency to be kind of a jerk, and I'm not okay with that anymore.
It's funny, I think, for women too. I mean, it's funny, but it's not funny for women too. Like, we hear a lot of soundtracks, and I can tell you the soundtracks that my mom told me they play. I have to fight those every single day.
Yeah.
Every single day. My team knows. I mean, my mom would always say, I just need you to sit down and maybe be quiet and maybe just turn a little bit down. And I'm like, okay.
But you're like, but I'm built for loud. I'm built for
that's not me. Yeah. And so that's it. But that I have to turn that down diligently every single day. And it doesn't take very much to come. And it's so interesting that how, like you said, 18 years ago, how long ago was that for me? And it's still playing, and how much work is that going to take? So if we can figure out ways to instill it, not just in ourselves, but in our kids right now, dang, what a gift that is.
Yeah. The tools that they'll get, it's great. Like, that's what's so exciting. Like, you get to kind of slingshot them into, the rest of their life with tools that you're like, wow, I wish I'd had these tools in the 8th grade. I wish I'd had these tools, in the a soundtrack I've given my 15-year-old, we talk about a lot now, is Nobody's Watching. Like, nobody's watching. And then I'll add, especially now. And what I mean by that is, if she goes to the mall or goes wherever and she feels that, okay, people are watching me, or I come to a football game and I'm late and they're going to notice. And I always say, like, well, nobody's watching, especially now, because they have their phone. Everyone is watching themselves. Nobody is watching. I'd say it to a coach. If a coach was like, I feel embarrassed about something, like, nobody's watching. Like, just do it. Like, do the thing. Like, everybody is watching themselves. Like, everybody is. And so go be your best self. Like, don't let that, be the thought that stops you. So, like, for me, I've got 2 teenage daughters. That's one that, with the 15-year-old, I talked to her about that. Like, no, nobody's watching. Let's go do it. Like, what does that look like? Like, nobody's watching. Let's go do it. So it just ends up being really fun. And I'll grab a link. I don't know if you guys have heard this one yet. I did a podcast with a woman named Colleen Berry. That was amazing.
It's so good. It's so
she
good.
Is a ball. Like, I wanted to talk to her for like an hour. So I'll show you.
I wanted you to. She was so good.
She was like, she just kept saying so many fascinating things. And I was like, I was taking tons of notes. A good podcast for me always changes into like a conversation midway where you start going, oh, wait a second. Like, you can tell, you can hear a podcast sometimes where, they got sent the book, they barely looked at the book, they got 10 questions from your PR team and it doesn't feel good. But with this book, like soundtracks, in the middle of every podcast I've done, it's turned into like a heart conversation where the person interviewing me goes, wait. So my husband and I are doing this thing, like, and you're like, oh yeah, let's unpack it. Or like, hey, and it's less topical. And again, like, I think it's a heart book disguised as a head book. And which is why, again, like, if you said to your husband, like, there's this book that's going to make you pull the thread on some things you haven't thought about, they're not going to read that. But if you go like, here's a business book from a New York Times bestseller, it's really funny. Like, you got a shot. That's all I'm saying. Here's the link to the podcast. If you haven't heard this one, like, Colleen Berry is a boss. Like, she lost her job. She had to take 4 jobs. She was a receptionist and went from receptionist to CEO of the company she's at. And like, she's just a boss. So that's the one, like, of the podcast I've done, I'm like, that's the jam.
The one you also did with Dave Hollis, I thought was really good when you were on.
Yeah, he's become like a really fun guy. Like, we text a bunch now. Like, he's a great example of, I need to encourage myself and other people. Don't assume you know somebody because you see their success. Like, don't like, and it was so easy for me to see he and Rachel and be like, oh, they're like these big, important celebrity people. And then like, I got on his podcast and he's just like another dude with a full heart trying to live a full life. And like, we ended up like, we're doing an Instagram live tomorrow on his channel. Like, he's hilarious. And we pass books back and forth. And so, yeah, I've really, same with like Greg McKeown, who wrote this book, Essentialism. Like, he wrote this book that sold 1 million copies. And I was like, I'm assuming you now get like a pony ride when you go to your publisher, like the whole world changes. He's like, no, like, like to get to know him and go like, oh, he has the same pressures that it doesn't matter if your book sold 1,000 copies or 1 million, like, you still go through it. Like, you still go through it. It's not like, he's not over the stress because he sold 1 million copies. It's just, he has a different set.
So one of the quotes you said when you were on with Dave Hollis was something about fear and faith. Do you remember?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So fear comes free. Faith takes work. Like, you will never have to go look for fear. Fear will find you. Like, fear will show up. Like we said, at the grocery store. You've never had to tell yourself, I think next Thursday at 4 p.m., I'm going to try to remember something dumb I said 5 years ago. Like it just happens. Where like faith, hope, those things take work. It takes you being deliberate and saying, okay, I'm going to remember this. I'm going like, here's a note I have on my wall. Like this says, ask for more, ask for more. I wrote that August 27th, 2020, because I found myself undervaluing my work in negotiations and in meetings. So I was like, I need to ask for more. Like, I need to do that. I need a reminder of that. And so that's the kind of thing where like, and then on my wall, I don't know if you guys can see that. There's like 55 soundtracks that I've just like, as I think of one, I'm like, oh, okay. Like I wrote today, number 56, I wrote, most things can wait 24 hours because I get really addicted to the urgent and I act like this is an emergency. And the reality is in my life, I'm not a surgeon. I'm not a pilot where like I can like, I'm landing a plane. Like most things can wait 24 hours. And if I'll give myself that space, then I don't get addicted to the urgent and I'm able to focus more on the important. So I'm like, I need to remember that. So I wrote it on my board and like, okay. Or like, you can take the first step without knowing the last. Like you can take the first one without knowing the last. Cause sometimes I'll talk to people that'll say, I'm trying to, launch something and they'll go, but I don't have a really good logo yet. And I'm like, you don't have anything yet. Why are we worried about the logo? Like, they'll go, I want to launch something, but I'm worried about somebody stealing my copyright. And I'm like, so you have to find a copyright lawyer before you start an Instagram account talking about health? Like, that's a beautiful complication. Like, you don't need to know that stuff. Like, just take the first one, take the second one, and then kind of develop it as you go. Or another one, number 21 is criticism that costs nothing is worth nothing. Criticism that costs nothing is worth nothing. If it took the person 14 seconds to write a mean comment to you on Instagram, that is worth nothing. It costs them nothing. It is therefore worth nothing. If a friend of mine who knows me and loves me says, hey, can we have coffee? I see some things in your life that I have a question about or I'm worried about. That's valuable. That costs that person being brave enough to tell me something I might not like to hear. That feedback has value. Criticism that costs nothing is worth nothing. So if somebody, and that doesn't make it easy, but if somebody pops on my Instagram and has something rude to say, like, and they're not my customer and all they did was like one sentence, they put 7 seconds into that, I don't want to give it 7 hours. That's a bad trade.
So someone else I know that also writes soundtracks on the wall is Carl Deichler, the CEO of Team Beachbody. So I'm going to guess if you do and he does, that's probably a good habit to get into. Seems like something successal people do. So I'm going to go with that.
I love that.
Yeah, I'm going to go with that.
Well, we have to, I know we had 30 minutes. We have to do a screenshot. So is everybody okay with that? Like, I know I'm putting you on the spot. Like
Beachbody coaches never take pictures. I mean, it's really hard for us to take
I know. Somebody said that once. I posted a bright green Lamborghini I saw driving by, and somebody honestly was like, I don't know that you should have posted that. They probably don't want the attention. I was like, it's a bright green Lamborghini. They're okay with attention, dude. Like, no one's like, so I always get this wrong. Is it Command Shift 3? All right, I'm going to smile. Ready? I'll give you a countdown.
Ready?
3, 2, 1. Hey, all right.
I'm
going to post that on my page. So I love what you guys do. Huge fan of it. I want to be back at live events. So hopefully at some point when you guys as a team, as an organization, or whatever, are having events that I know you come to Nashville some because it's awesome. Everyone comes to Nashville. It's the best place ever. Whenever next to Indianapolis, I will say this, like y'all's Children's Museum is amazing. The Indianapolis Children's Museum is top notch. I don't know why we don't have great direct flights from Indy to Nashville. Like there's not a lot of easy flights. Like somebody got in a fight at some point. That and then your stadium's amazing too. Gosh,
I know.
We did a band competition there 2 years ago, and I was like, what? Like, because I've been to some other football stadiums. I'm like, this is way too nice to be a football stadium.
Well, if you get a roof on yours, then it would be a little bit better. But
that's fair. Well, we got to win some stuff first. Like they don't give. I mean, except for Green Bay, they don't give roofs to people who haven't won stuff. So I think I don't make the rules for the NFL, but that seems like one. But all right, well, expect me to post this later, guys. Okay. Keep an eye out for Instagram.
We're going to stay on a little bit. So thanks, Jon. Right. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. See ya.
Surprise.
Oh my gosh, sorry, I'm unmuting because I have to run to a meeting, but did you see my face? I was like, he's on here. Oh. No, have a wonderful day. I'm sorry. I got to go learn about the ISTEP test.
Oh, that stinks. That stinks. So do you guys have anything else that you want to share about the book or anything else about his podcast or just anything else that you want to talk about? I just didn't want to close out when he got off if you wanted to share anything.
Just that he's awesome. I feel like I could listen to him just constantly. Like having him here, it's like I've been listening to him in my house with my AirPods in, just walking around. And it's like he's just still now I'm looking at him talk to me. Like I feel like it's so tangible. Mm-hmm. Like in his lightheartedness about it and the way that he just kind of repeats similar themes, but with stories and it's been really good. I'm so excited to actually now I got my hard copy and I want to start highlighting because I've only listened. So it's good. Yeah.
I think his podcast is really, really good. And it's kind of a restart for him. He had done one before. And so he restarted this one all about goals. And, as we all know, I'm a hoarder. So I hoard in all things, not just physical things. I hoard in just about everything. So if I'm reading a book with the author and then I'm on the podcast app and I'm just typing in his name to find other podcasts, which is how I found the Dave Hollis and then just other ones that they're on. And because authors will say, or speakers will say something just a little bit differently on all these different podcasts, all these different platforms. And the more often I hear it, the more often it helps me cement it into my brain, but also hear it in a way that maybe I didn't hear it before. So I encourage you just to go on the podcast app and type in his name or any other name of someone that resonates with you and find all that stuff and listen to it, especially now. Cause when authors have a book, they're on the circuit. So he's going to be on all the podcasts. So you're going to find him in a lot of different places. But that is really cool that he's going to do an IG Live with Dave Hollis tomorrow. So, we'll have to stay tuned for that. That would be really fascinating to tune into. So anything else? It's just such a great book. And if you haven't read his others, it's a great opportunity to go back and listen to his others too.
Yeah, I'm going to go back and listen to some of his books too, but this is probably the first time that I've really listened fully to a book on Audible and then heard his voice and seen the author in person to make that connection. And I feel like for me, it just brought it a deeper meaning, if that makes sense, deeper connection. And I just loved his examples, especially with, using a lot of men and things like that too. And I was just constantly thinking this would be a good book for my husband. And it's something we could connect on. And I don't know. I was kind of starstruck when he got on. I was like, oh, Jeremy, he's here. But no, this has been an incredible book. And it's like, I think so many of us have said that he's in my head, everything that he said. That random thought from 15 years ago that you feel shame about or guilt comes back and you're like, dear Lord, why? Yes. And just working on changing that soundtrack and especially with our children too. I think those are just so applicable. So great.
It's a self-awareness, that. Let me observe, let me notice, and then let me just make a little shift. This isn't, like he says, he's like, I'm not an idiot. My brain's just being a jerk. So let me observe and notice and then make a change rather than, continue down that self-punishment rabbit hole, which then doesn't serve us in any way. I remember when Jay Shetty spoke at Leadership in Fall and his book had come out and I tried to listen to it, tried to read it. And I was like, I couldn't quite get into it. And then he spoke. And then I was so mesmerized by listening to him talk. I felt so, like you said, Liz, so connected to him that then I read his book after that. And I loved it. So sometimes just listening and fortunately for us now with technology, we can listen to someone on Instagram or we can listen to them on, a Facebook Live or any other kind of platform. And you get to feel like you know them a little bit more. And I think that makes, like you said, their work feel a little bit more personal to you, and I always enjoy when an author goes a little bit off-road and adds in the extra stuff, which he does all the time. That makes it a little bit more fun too. So anything else before we wrap up? Kim? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that I heard him say that quote with Dave Hollis about, well, this is my first global pandemic. And that along with his, if you're overthinking, you're not in action. Those two concepts together are huge for everything. I mean, I got the Johnson & Johnson shot on Friday. Monday, it gets paused. I could sit in overthinking for hours. and oh my God, now I have a headache. And what does that mean? And it's like, just giving yourself grace to be okay. Like, okay, I'm a little nervous. I'm a little anxious.
Mm-hmm.
All right, cool. Got it. Move on, because there's nothing I can do about it now.
Right.
And it's so applicable right now that there are so many things where I'm like, oh, I feel like I've been in my house for days. Oh, I have. Okay, go outside, go do something.
Right.
So anyway, thank you so much for having me in here.
He's the best.
Yeah.
He's just so much fun. So
I was going to say,
yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say this book could not have been more timely, because I've always dealt with intrusive thoughts, and I have a younger son who has OCD and intrusive thoughts. And so I think the biggest blessing of this book was in the first chapter, and be like, I'm not alone. I'm not the only one. And I always had my dad in my ear to be my cheerleader and tell me, like, you're fine, you're good. That's not true. And I can't stop listening to this book. I listen to it on the plane. I listen to it when I get here, when I need a break from mom. It's just been a true blessing in timing, and just I'm a person of faith. So I'm like, this is just all working together for good. This is the Lord's
100%.
timing. This is the book I needed this week.
100%. And, books will do that. If we just, not to overthink what we're overthinking about our reading, but books will do that. If we just give them some space, we're always so trying to force the book, and I got to read the book that everyone's reading, and I got to do all that. And if we just kind of give it some space and go, well, maybe I'll try this book, or I'll try this book, or maybe this book. Well, and I always use the example of 7 Laws of Leadership. I had tried to read that book multiple times before I actually read it. I read it in the time I needed to read it. It was the book I needed to help our team get to superstar. But had I read that before, when it came out, it wouldn't have resonated. So, there's a reason why this book is here for you now, why it's here for all of us now, especially, as Jon said, especially now in 2020, 2021, when everyone's overthinking everything, just to have this little switch to have a tool. It's just another tool in our toolbox. What a lovely gift we have to have another tool in our toolbox to help people. So as I was mentioning, Joy Bowen is another coach in the network, and she is friends with him through some, I can't remember why. She's friends with him from something. And she got with this people that they're doing a team call, and she shared it with some of us. So I will share that information. It is April 20th. So just go ahead and mark that on your calendar. I'll put it in the team page as an event too, because she said we could. But I wanted this to be special for you. So you get this, but this will be for anyone who wants to show up, and it'll be larger scale. So it really probably won't be very much Q&A. It'll be more just kind of him talking and sharing. April 20th. I don't know what time. I'm guessing probably like an 8 p.m. kind of time situation. But I'll put that all in there and just mark it down and know that that's going to be available to you as well. And if I hear anything else, I'll let him know. But now I'm going to go message people and see if I can get him on my podcast so we can hear him again. Just messaging all the people, and just wait till you hear Carrie Lorenz I interviewed this week. And if you've not read her book, Fearless Leadership, that came out a couple of years ago. I read that and I listened to it as well. I would recommend, if you're looking for a book, that's a good one. Also, because she has another one coming out in June. Her next one comes out in June, and it's called Span of Control, which is all about controlling the controllable. So it's kind of nice to have her first book, Fearless Leadership, before you then read her second one. Just gives you a little bit of context. And she was one of the first female F-14 fighter pilots in the Navy. So she's kind of a badass and has a lot of really great experience. And she takes that kind of military experience into just business and life experience. So I think you'll really like her. And she's got 4 kids, she's doing all the thing, she's really awesome. So that's another one to kind of add to your list as well. So, okay. Happy Thursday. Hope you had great paychecks and all those kinds of things, and great rank advancements and great momentum in your team. Go use this book with your challengers and your coaches. And I'll talk to you tomorrow in the team page, noon, Friday, tomorrow, Friday Fire Up. Have a great day.